Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Live Now from Fox. Now, the man arrested, suspected in the stabbing death of UCLA graduate student is now in police custody. Pasadena police on Wednesday arresting Sean Lavelle Smith for the murder of 24-year-old Brianna Kupfer. Smith initially gave authorities a fake name, the Department Fugitive Unit using his fingerprints to confirm his identity after being dispatched to the scene. Joining us now to speak on this story is Dr. Debbie Goodman, criminologist and professor. Dr. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Rain, thank you. And again, it's a macabre day anytime we're talking about the death, the violent, heinous, random act of violence. So if you'll kindly allow me to express my sincere and heartfelt condolences to the Kupfer family on this just brutal murder.
Absolutely, and you mentioned that this is a random act of violence, one of many that we've been seeing across the country. Are you concerned that this is becoming a trend?
I'm concerned, Rain. I don't want to hit the panic button, but I do want to express the opportunities for our audience members to be mindful, to be aware, to be alert at all times of their surroundings. Because as a criminologist, here's how we define, let's say, and determine when something of this magnitude is considered the category of random act of violence. And that tends to be where there's no provocation, there's no explanation, and it's something that happens very suddenly without warning. And so today I know we'll be engaged in the Brianna Kupfer case, but there have been two other high-profile cases as well throughout the country of a similar nature. And here we are, just 1 month into the calendar year. But if we may also recognize and respect the loss of life of Sandra Shells, a 70-year-old nurse who also perished at a bus station, again, with such a brutal attack that led to her demise. Michelle Go in New York, pushed into the train station. So these are very concerning murders. Now, again, when we look at the data, and this is going to be important data to point to, we have information from the CDC that has determined there has been a 30% uptick from 2019 to 2020 in murders across the country. And now we look at all of that from preceding years to the present, and that is the single highest jump in homicides that we have ever seen in 100 years. And to continue that issue, we also have data from the FBI that points to, in most of these instances, firearms have been the weapon of number one choice. Secondarily would be the knives.
Dr. Debbie Goodman, you touched on many topics. First, I would like to speak on the fact that you mentioned three other cases. The Sandra Shells case, she was attacked at a bus stop. You also talked about Michelle Go, that case. She was pushed into a subway train. All of these cases involved homeless individuals and violent crimes. So I know that you've done a lot of research in this field. What does the research tell us about this specific community and these types of crimes? Is this more of a call to action, if you will, for mental health when it comes to vulnerable communities?
Right, and those are excellent areas, Rain, for us to discuss today. So let's start first with our homeless citizens. It is actually irregular to see violent types of crimes perpetrated by this audience. We tend to look at other profiling issues, but this is where, even as a criminologist, I find it very irregular that this population has participated in such short succession. Again, this 1 month period of time of three high-profile cases. So when we look at the audience of the homeless community, there can be criminal behavior, but usually it falls more under the category of property crime, if you will, shoplifting, perhaps for food, pandering for money, offenses of, sleeping, let's say, in front of businesses. So now this becomes a bit of an alarming issue for us because it's irregular. It's not within the framework of our profiles and our patterns. But when we go back and pan back to CDC data and just the overall magnitude of murders that have spiked 30% from one calendar year to the next, now we start to go level by level to now answer your next question and to address the mental health issue. So when we start there, we could look at it almost as the octopus. That could indeed be the home base, if you will. But now the outreach of the tentacles, what could that point to? Certainly a status of stress and strain. The pandemic has indeed created crises for many individuals throughout our country. There's strain on the families. There's financial stress with the magnitude of individuals whose employment has been compromised. And when people are in crises, they could indeed act in a manner that is even out of character for them, because we're also looking at a lot of other things happening in the country as it relates to crime. And we've got road rage, we've got air rage, we've got people in a state of high alert and agitation. So it's very concerning. But I would like to add this, Rain, to the conversation on mental health. As we know, as criminologists, there's different levels and layers to that too. We could almost look at a scale, if you will, of 1 to 10, 1 being a mild form, somewhere in the 5 range, moderate, and then here we are at the excessive range of 10. But if we put the legality issues together, and if we ask the question, well, are these individuals who are participating in these crimes, are they legally insane? I'd like to address that piece, because insanity in our criminal justice system is a very low probability and percentage. Less than 2% of cases on murder that go to trial are successful in the insanity defense. And what we would be looking at there would be a 2-pronged test, as we call it. Does the individual know what he or she is doing? That's step 1. Secondarily, does the individual know that what he or she is doing is wrong? And in most of these cases, Rain, whatever category of violent crime we put this in, most individuals who participate know what they're doing, and they know what they're doing is wrong.
So let's talk about these statistics for a second, because a 30% increase in murder rate, that's the highest increase in a single year. So this brings us to the point of rage in general. You briefly mentioned the air rage that we are seeing. Passengers on airlines, quite frankly, just losing it. What can you say about this? What's to blame?
Right. So again, we always start at some level of a baseline as a criminologist, and then we continue going from there. So if we're looking, they've missed a flight, or the flight is delayed, or now the flight is increasingly crowded. So there's a bit of frustration already. There's a bit of agitation and anger. And now the issue of the mask. Some individuals do not want to wear the mask on the flight. It's a mandate, and we're seeing these types of instances of, as you say, just explosive conduct, anger, rage. People are becoming enraged and outraged. And it's almost like the volcano, Rain. So much has been building up, and now all of a sudden, the trigger is enough to create such an outburst, and even among people that could be one's neighbor or coworker or friend or family member. We're really seeing an across the board level of this type of hostility being displayed, on the airways. Now, if we transition to road rage, that too creates another level and layer to the conversation of individuals making a purposeful, intentional, willful choice to, on the highways, the turnpikes, the city streets, within arm's reach, perhaps in a car console or glove box, reach for their gun, discharge it, and therein lies a whole other variety of crimes in that one situation, which could, of course, be vehicular homicide if somebody dies, attempted murder, unlawful use of weapons. So I don't want to raise the panic alarm, but I definitely want to always encourage awareness, mindfulness. Our goal every day for ourselves, our families, our communities is safety, security, and survival.
So I do want to bring things back to the Brianna Kupfer case, because at the forefront of our conversation, you mentioned two other very high-profile cases that are taking place across the country. And by the way, we still don't know if that 911 caller in the Kupfer case will receive that $250,000 reward that led to Smith's arrest. But I would like to know, and many of us are asking, what constitutes a high-profile case? Because many people are losing loved ones due to random acts of violence, but they're not getting the same national attention or support. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, correct, Rain. You know, any type of violent death, of course, we know is hideous, it's sickening, it's brutal. So a high-profile case tends to be one that there's a thread about the person, meaning the victim, potentially an area about the suspect. So if we go back to Brianna and the tragedy that occurred, was a talented and bright-minded young lady with her whole career path and future that she was striving for, her education at UCLA to be involved in architectural design. She was industrious, working, at her place of employment. So when we look at her story, this could be anybody's best friend, daughter. Wow. And so it pulls at us because she did nothing wrong. Her whole entirety of existence was contributory. So that's one issue on Brianna. When we pan over to Sandra Shells, we have a 70-year-old nurse who spent, Rain, of almost 40 years of her career helping others, a nurse who's putting her own health and safety, certainly during these COVID years. And yet the horror of her simply being at the bus station and being brutally attacked, hit in the head, falling to the concrete, fracturing a skull, it's just, again, it pulls at us because that could be one's mother, one's grandmother. And now with Michelle Go, although we do not know that it's been classified as the hate crime yet, however, being the victim and Asian American descent, we wonder, was that potentially how and why the suspect decided to push her into the trainways and again to submit to such a violent, heinous death. So it's horrible, Rain, anytime we look at a murder, but some cases draw more attention perhaps on media platforms because there's some type of backstory about the individual, whether it's the victim and or the perpetrator, at least in these three cases, will say himself, because the thread there is the commonality of the homeless status.
Very insightful information. And you also mentioned that you are encouraging women to use their intuition. I think that's interesting because this arrest is coming as we're finding out more details about the final moments of Brianna's death. She actually texted her friend saying that she was uncomfortable.
Yes, and thank you for raising that very important point. And I would extend the conversation, men and women. You know, there's something that we all have, and that's our gut. And I'm a big proponent of if and when we have a sense that our gut is at ill ease and there is something uneasy about a circumstance we're in, an individual with whom we're in their presence, again, we need to take action because uppermost in our mind is safety, security, survival. So if the action means we simply get out of that environment, I always like to encourage our community members, we don't need to have all of the facts A to Z in front of us, A, B, and C is enough. Just an irregular, uneasy type of feeling. That's our physiological reactions, our gut reactions telling us if something doesn't look right, sound right, feel right, let us take our own appropriate action for survival and get out of the situation.
Dr. Goodman, what's the takeaway message here?
Well, Rain, the takeaway message is these are concerning, troubling issues. We are looking at just the homicide rates themselves of this massive jump of 30%. We don't want to engage, Rain, in any type of provocation either. Remember, sometimes we can be right and dead right. So when it comes to these other types of circumstances as well, road rage circumstance and other instances where we already have a sense that somebody with whom we're interacting is agitated, is hostile, is aggressive, we need to, again, maintain our calm, our composure. But I really would like to stress individuals being mindful of their circumstance, being aware of their surroundings, and just always encouraging safety, security, survival, as well as the see something, say something. Our almost 1 million local, state, and federal law enforcement officers, Rain, are men and women who daily are doing their very best through dedication, devotion, determination. We appreciate certainly all that they do, but they can't be everywhere. They can't be everywhere. That's why we need citizens, we need community to make those calls when they feel there's something irregular and or a crime is potentially occurring or about to occur and or occurring.
Absolutely, Dr. Debbie Goodman, criminologist and also professor at St. Thomas University. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rain.